Oncilla. Oncilla looked to the cosmos. Celestial bodies spun across the night sky, swirling away from the first of the rising moons. Under the measureless expanse, she could pretend to escape the oppression of the guild and its collar around her neck. She imagined staring up at the stars from back home as a free woman again. She probably wouldn't have even considered it if Caracal hadn't discussed their dream of leaving so much recently. With Caracal and the 4 footpads, Uncilla camped along the side of the arid isle. The minor path meandered from Sauvain's capital of Hisafe to numerous smaller villages, including Fagori. A portion of the merchant road also spanned from the capital to the outlying towns, but commissioned lamplighters maintained oil lanterns along the Sauvaini section of the busy trail. The arid isle had no such illuminating provisions, and it ran between sand dunes, yielding strategic hiding spots along the route in contrast to the inconvenient flatlands trailing along the merchant road. Between the 6 Fahundry members, they had decided their best chance to pick off soldiers would be on the smaller, more isolated path. By word of mouth from an informant stationed in Hisafe, this was the first night the soldiers deployed for the front lines. Therefore, this was the Fahundry's first night lying in wait for the Northern Crusade members to come marching through. Uncilla had been surprised that it had taken so long for the marching orders to send forth, but beyond that, she did not concern herself with the decisions of the Low King. Simultaneously, she both wished that soldiers would and would not march by them tonight. I hope they'll be wise enough to take the longer, safer route to the northernmost towns, rather than the shorter, more treacherous one. Then again, I want to get paid so I can eat. In the open desert, Uncilla felt exposed. She was accustomed to hiding in the shadows of houses, around bends and hallways, underneath beds, and behind curtains. She had also found her slender frame squeezed into a storage crate on rare occasions. But there were no solid structures or tight corners in the midst of the dunes. She could not immediately tell if she were in someone's line of sight or not, and it worried her. The sand itself did nothing to ease her fears. It was malleable and provided no means of stability, nothing to grab to reassure herself. She put on a brave face for Caracal, though. Caracal had been reluctant enough to cooperate with the footpads. Uncilla had to pretend to believe in the plan to assure her best friend they were not making a poor decision. After the start of the second moonfall, Caracal slipped across the neighboring dune to alert her that fires approached. She scuttled away as soon as she relayed her message. Uncilla squeezed and released her hands. She adjusted her feet, slid down a dune, and readjusted her tunic to appear a little disorderly. With the lights approaching, she could see the figures for herself. The dunes still obscured part of her vision, but she could make out that 7 people approached. Can they take 7? This isn't going to work. What I'd give to be anywhere else. I don't want to do this! Before they were in earshot, the leader of the footpads, Lynx, said, "Uncilla, go now." She slid into place. Inhale, exhale. Just get it over with. Sweat moistened her hair despite the cool desert night. A drop rolled from her hairline down the back of her neck. It tingled like a lover grazing light fingers along her curves. She was just grateful the soldiers wouldn't notice her perspiration in the low lamplight. "I'm confused by the whole situation," one voice from the approaching group stated. "I've been to Kaying and Kramos, and all the Raisaglai in both cities were perfectly civilized." "I've been to Kaying and Mashri up north, too," another voice agreed. "The ones that are doing this are some rogue group." "I've never met a violent Raisaglai in my whole life." "We'll crush these extremists and everyone will go home. The High King is overreacting by calling a whole crusade over such a minor ordeal." "I couldn't agree more. We'll be the only ones who actually fight the Raisaglai. Everyone else will show up when we're heading out." "We'll be war heroes when we return home," one of the voices exclaimed. "Saviors of the realm, protector of the spawn, and, by extension, the immortal lives of all. We might even earn sainthoods from it." Uncilla couldn't distinguish how many voices there were, but based on the numbers, she speculated that there were possibly more than 7. The group marched straight toward her, so she couldn't get a more accurate body count. She looked to the hills where Caracal and Lynx hid, but they did not indicate to abort the operation, so she assumed they thought that they could take the lot. Oncilla was more uncertain with every step they proceeded forward. Despite their lamps, they would soon notice her if she darted away. There was still no signal. If the assault goes poorly, will the soldiers execute us or take us to the Low King's dungeons? I don't want to die for this. But would cells with physical chains be worse than the ones the Vahantri have on me? When the soldiers crossed the next dune, she inhaled deeply and calmed herself as best she could. She ran toward the soldiers. In the light, they were closer to a dozen. Oncilla hoped her companions could handle them all. You were soldiers, correct? At least the anxiety in her voice was authentic. Astonished mutters greeted her. Yes, ma'am, but what are you doing out here? The soldier in front asked. Like the others, his face guard was up, so she could see his expression. It would be easier to kill them that way, but it unsettled Oncilla to learn what their victims looked like. Still, she proceeded with the plan. I was taking my father to Hisafe. He's a spawn, but his mind leaves him due to his age. I woke up from your voices to find he's wandered off. He's on his last slice of life. If he dies alone in the desert, I can't imagine that he won't condemn everyone he's ever met, especially me. Please help me look for him, I beg you. Fortune has smiled upon you. This is what we're here for. Once we locate your father, I will personally escort the spawn back to Hisafe. The rest of you will continue to the border. For now, everyone spread out to search. Thank you so much. It means the world to me. Forced gratification splayed across Oncilla's face. The expressions on the soldiers' faces transformed from cautious to anticipatory. Clearly they didn't expect to be needed so soon, and why should they doubt a claim that sounds plausible? The soldiers wondered where her party members awaited. The man, who had given the orders, stayed with her while they searched. Amide! Oncilla called. Father! The other soldiers took up the call, revealing their positions. Hushed scuffles clamored beyond the dune crests. Do not be concerned, we will find your father, the lead soldier reassured her. The calls of the other soldiers faded. Oncilla wondered if that was because they were wandering too far off, or if they had been murdered. Who am I fooling? I know which it is. I know, and thank you. I remember, the soldier said before an arrow shot straight through his head. The shaft pierced the bridge of his nose. His eyes crossed toward the fletching. His body dropped slower than expected. So gross, I hate this! She refrained from jumping away, horrified. The image made her want to vomit. She did not have the stomach for slaying the way that Caracal did. On their previous jobs, she avoided watching the assassinations if possible. Is that all of them? Lynx asked gruffly. Mm-hmm. Caracal cleaned one of her serrated daggers on a rag that was more crusted blood than cloth and slid the blade back into its scabbard on her belt. Affirmative responses echoed from the other footpads. Drag the bodies over here and quench the light. If more soldiers come before we finish digging the graves, we'll get them too. Oncilla felt ill. The man killed right in front of her stuck in her mind, even more so as she dragged his body toward the others. Guilt tugged at her as she tugged him. He had seemed nice. The 6 of them gathered around the bodies, congratulating each other. In total, there were 10 soldiers in the pile. Systematically, Margay and Kodkod separated the heads of the soldiers from their shoulders. There was shockingly little noise for the metal slicing through each neck, the windpipe, bone, and all. Once they cleaved the heads, the helmets served as bowls to balance them in, and Margay loaded the helmeted heads into a wooden cart. If they were seen traveling during the daylight, overlain animal corpses would hide the goods and provided a cover for the bloody cart. Oncilla grabbed a shovel. Did you shoot the arrow? Oncilla asked Caracal while they dug the graves. Yes. Thank you. You saved me the trouble of killing him myself. Half of the statement was for show. To her knowledge, the footpads didn't know she had no stomach for killing, and she worried they would demand to redistribute the profits if they did. As it was, she and Caracal had negotiated an even split between the 2 of them and the 4 footpads. Even though there were more of the footpads, Oncilla endangered herself as bait. Caracal had suggested that option, knowing it might make an easy out for her friend, but it was still terrifying nonetheless. If anything went wrong and they were exposed, Oncilla would be the most likely to die. Caracal nodded. When they finished digging up the sandy terrain, dumped the corpses, and covered them again, Caracal asked, What's the plan? Will we camp here until Akol rises, or will we return now? I'm satisfied with the profit we'll rake in from tonight. And besides, the third moon has set. I doubt we'll have any more luck. We'll be taking too great a risk if we strike anywhere close to first sunrise. Lynx spoke for the group. Murmurs of agreement echoed. All right, let's deliver these assets. Caracol took up one of the legs of the cart, and the only female footpad, Iriamote, grabbed the other. Oncilla hated every step they took back to the cage of their guild's cathedral. As they hauled their loot along the arid aisle, Codcod struck up a melancholy whistle to the tune of A Whisper of Woe. It was a song written by a bard that had angered his king in a past age. The song had passed through the Vahantry's halls for thousands of rotations, and in some cases, it had been used for one guild member to identify another. Oncilla couldn't help but recall the words as the whistling continued. Inside her head, she sang, Sail, sail down the river of woe. Take it long and take it slow. Ride the stream, ride the flow, and come ashore once you know. Snake and sneak and softly row. Do the deed, then the low. Earn your keep, eat the dough. Sail, sail down the river of woe. After the conclusion of the second verse, Lynx told Codcod to cease the whistling. The remainder of the trip back to the regional hideout endured until second sunrise, after the first sun, Akol, had fully illuminated the sky. Oncilla frowned when the desert shifted into savanna and scowled when the cathedral came into view. Outside the cathedral's grounds, a group of pickpockets transferred a couple severed heads to a wagon guarded by a cloaked, hunching figure. At least Oncilla assumed there was a human draped within the folds of the plum-colored cloth. By how small it was, she assumed it must have been a withered woman under there. At the end of the transfer, a thinner than even her own, wrinkled hand stretched out of the cloak and deposited 2 double-cut emeralds into the receiving hand. Initially, the pickpockets were ecstatic at the payout. Targeted pickpocketing rarely paid as well as murder. Even so, a double cut was a reasonable price per head. The hag knew the market. She'll be out of gems soon if we continue at our current pace, unless she's stealing the stones straight from the monarch's vaults. The pickpockets' delight shifted to resentment once they counted the number of heads lolling in their companion's cart. They looked on enviously at the mass between the slaughtered beasts. The hag gave no indication of surprise by their impressive work and compensated Lynx once they transferred the heads. Lynx divided the profits between everyone right then so no one could accuse him of trying to cheat them. As agreed, he gave 5 of the 10 double-cut emeralds to Caracal to split between herself and Oncilla, while he divided the other 5 gems between the 4 footpads. Can you break the last double, or should I? Caracal gave Oncilla 2 of the green gemstones. I doubt I have emeralds to break it. Oncilla dug through her pouch to confirm her suspicion. She had plenty of Sylvani lead coins, but she lacked the Wojetan currency. Caracal pocketed the 3rd double cut and withdrew a single cut and a few sizable shards to deposit in Oncilla's hand. Oncilla transferred the gem quickly, hoping that the pickpockets weren't getting any ideas about her own purse. Philaday emerged from a side gate to the cathedral's grounds. When she approached the hag's cart, the regional leader nodded approvingly at the first hall. We can do better, she said, glancing from the severed heads to the breathing ones of her guildmates. But I do believe that there will be no further deliveries this evening. All the groups have now returned. The hag lowered its head inside its cloak and withdrew Philaday's share of the profits. A single cut transferred from the hag's purse to Philaday's hand. Caracal stiffened beside Oncilla, her jaw clenched. The hunched woman nodded again and faded along with the cart. I suppose it makes sense the buyer would pay for transportation mages to help with this effort. But if they can afford a double cut per head and transportation mages for all of the regional Vahantry locations, they must be swimming in wealth, Uncilla said. Philaday said, I take it as a good sign. It means we'll have business for a long while. Perhaps we'll even upgrade our current arrangements. Oncilla couldn't help but smile at the possibility. Getting out of this place would be a great first step. Get some sleep, Velidae said. Reports indicate that there will be additional movement tomorrow night. The chapter leader slipped back into the cathedral's grounds. Everyone else followed her through the rusted iron gate. They trudged between the garden plots, and Caracal picked pieces of ripe food as she noticed them. Oncilla plucked a few monkey oranges and baobab fruits. If she didn't take them, the sand sparrows would. Caracal and Oncilla split from the group to deposit the pickings in the kitchen. A pot of soup boiled over the fire, and a loaf of bread sat out next to old cheese. Otherwise, there wasn't much to eat. Oncilla was grateful someone had made the trip to purchase the bread and cheese. The pair of friends left the fruit on the counter so that the next person who had chef duty could find them, and Oncilla cut a slice of bread in anticipation of Caracal's pending emotional release. Caracal erupted. How does Velidae get a single cut for not doing any work? Oncilla slid a side glance in Caracal's direction while she carved the cheese next. Each head is earning more than twice a single cut with a double cut, Oncilla said diplomatically. I'm not going to complain when the compensation is fair. But why does Velidae get compensated at all? It's not like she paid the finders for locating the job for us. The work fell into her lap. She had to pay for the information that the soldiers were coming last night, and she still has to pay her guild dues to Credo. Besides, we might upgrade our facilities. That would partially come out of her gem purse. Who is going to contribute the most toward that? Caracal challenged. What else do we have to spend gem on? Oncilla asked. We can't buy more clothes or personal items. There's no spare space. I trip over with boxes poking out from under my cot as it is. I'd like to move. I want my own bedroom. I want a trunk of items, all my own, that doesn't need to be shoved under the bed. I want the protection of a weather and a healing mage. I hate getting sick. I hate dealing with spontaneous floods and bouts of freezing weather. Don't you want to get out of the middle of nowhere? Caracal's expression turned hesitant at the mention of mages. She said, Perhaps by the end of this job we can afford a place in Hisafe, just the two of us. If only. We'll need dozens of double cuts for that. We'd need top-tier gems. We could save for it. We still have to pay guild dues to eat. As much as I love the idea, it's unrealistic. Imagine your life in the city, free from the guild. What would you do? Caracal asked. Would you take up artistry again? Free from the guild? Oncilla frowned. If I started painting again, it wouldn't take long until I was identified and arrested. I'd have to do something different, but I don't know how to do anything else. What would you do? Probably the same as I do now, without the middlemen, but we could still do it. If we separated from the guild, and coincidentally a lockpick and an assassin show up elsewhere, they'd kill us, or turn in an anonymous note to the regional army with our names and location. We're stuck, Oncilla said, unless we could learn another trade. We could farm? Oncilla nearly laughed. Could you imagine how much easier it would be to grow food inside a weather mage's protective barrier? Caracal looked like she considered it, too. Perhaps the chapter can more easily afford to move collectively, Oncilla said. I can't imagine anyone is fond of being here. Is it the inadequate sewage system, or the lamentable selection of food? Caracal asked. The general lack of gentle suitors? There's also the delightful array of wildlife. As she spoke, she looked around the kitchen, spotting a shade spider that had made its nest over a crack in the floor, and gestured to it before killing the venomous creature and disposing of the sticky dark web in the kitchen's midden bin. The first two are concerning. I couldn't care less about the latter two, except for maybe the scorpions, Oncilla said skeptically. But please, endure our situation for now. Conditions will change, and additional options will open. Her dream is infectious, and it's going to get both of us into trouble if we act without a thorough plan. She'll get herself into trouble if she speaks too openly about it, and I can't endure here without her. At that moment, Ocelot, one of the guild's finders, entered the kitchen wearing an apron. Kitchen duty for you today? Caracal asked. She was critical of others' cooking skills, and Ocelot had some of the worst. Has Velidae not updated the schedule? Ocelot shuffled past them both and took stock of the fresh fruits. I have kitchen duty today and every day while my skills are rendered otherwise unnecessary. I suppose I got off easy. Serval's out there working the fields and Panthera's herding the livestock. Caracol's expression soured. Felidae did update it and told everyone, but Caracal stormed out of the room before she heard the announcement. Oncilla cast a mocking glance to her friend. Caracal stole Oncilla's bread slice before her friend had the chance to eat it. Oncilla cut another piece before her previous slice was fully off the counter. She anticipated Caracal would take it. Thank you for the bread, by the way. Ocelot widened his eyes pointedly. Any excuse to get out of this dump for a few days and find civilization. I do not understand how people can stay here for days and weeks while waiting for a job. At least while I'm searching out work for you all, I get paid to eat and drink in taverns. While I'm out, I prefer not to find work so I don't have to return to this filthy place. Caracal raised an eyebrow. You finders have the best job by far, Ocelot, but you are not wrong about this shithole. We did. Now we've got the worst. Being here constantly, doing all the menial chores. I wish I'd never come back from getting bread. The hag lurking in the grounds scared the shit out of me when I returned this morning. I don't think any of us particularly like it stalking the headquarters. You know, another peculiar client just like that had paid for the assassination of King Tanzanite's cousin a few rotations at the moon back. Yeah, the job you two ran just before this. Caracal stopped her chewing. Was it another decrepit hag in a cart? No, but they were just as secretive. With the hag, no matter how bright the sunlight hit it, you can't ever see inside the dark folds. That's not normal. Even in poorly lit taverns, a trickle of candlelight illuminates a cheek crest or an eyeball of even the most private of customers. And it was similar to the previous client. Different robes in different locations, but where I could usually pick out a face shape, or at least how large the person was or their gender, I couldn't get any discernible information out of them about who they were. Strange. Caracal ripped off another piece. We get the worst the realm has to offer at our doorstep, don't we? If it were that convenient, I'd be out of a job. But you think tracking those monsters down is simple? Ocelot asked. You're in the position of power, knowing who to kill. I have to worry about whether our patrons will try to kill me for what I know. No, you're right. Besides, I don't mind skipping chores for a while. Caracal strolled from the kitchen, and Oncilla followed soon after. Tread carefully, Oncilla warned Caracal while they navigated to their sleeping quarters. Your grievances can land you in trouble. With a half-hearted smile, Caracal said, Don't worry, I will.